Nunya, thank you very much for this nice introduction, and welcome to everyone. I see the announcement of who is attending, and it well really puts on some pressure to see that there's from every corner of the world people are participating in this conference. Yes, what I would like to do, as Nuno said, is to share some insights from the research project we did on how to engage smart users to smart grids. And oh, wait, sorry. I think Nuno introduced myself, but I think full credit should go to the whole team. The operating agent of this task was Linda Hull from the UK, and I think the credits for this nice presentation should go especially to her because she did a lot of work to compose this information. And furthermore, we had participation from Norway, South Korea, Sweden, and again UK. So the main results are mainly collected in these countries. Let me briefly describe what the aim of the project was. What we thought would be wise to do is to draw together international experiences from smart grid projects to have a better understanding of how we can engage the demand side to become an active a stakeholder in the smart grid. And what we did is we looked not so much only at technologies, but also policies and tools had an important role in our assessment. And the work program is well shown on the bottom right. We had a work package on the impact of markets, one work package with the interaction of technology, and then one on risks and rewards, and all was drawn together to make conclusions on the offers and programs that could be offered to consumers. And then finally there was a synthesis and dissemination work package. Well, this is briefly what I just said. We have a consumer, a central role for the consumer, and we look at the policy. For example, is there already a smart meter rollout mandated? Are there any appliance standards in place? What is the market structure of the electricity market? What are the exact settlement arrangements? And for the tools, you can think of examples. Are there any time of use tariffs in place? Are there any specific energy services being proposed to the end users? Is there an opportunity to demand aggregation? And what kind of energy advice is being shared with consumers? And well, of course, we also had a look at the technology. For example, what are the functionalities of smart meters? Are there any in-home displays? And if smart meters are rolled out, is it then including an in-home display, or is this an additional services being provided by commercial players in the market? What kind of smart appliances are available? And is there any remote or automated control of any devices in the home? Well, I think behavior is very familiar to all of us because we do it every day. Switching off lights when leaving the room sounds very simple. But if you want to better understand what behavior is and what are the drivers behind behavior, you need, well, at least we used a model to have a better understanding of the individual aspects. First of all, in the middle, you see a green box that's awareness. If someone is not aware of an opportunity, for example, he or she is not aware that there are electric vehicles around, then you will never buy it. And once you know that the technology or a service is around, you will start to form an attitude around it. You will have an opinion whether you like it or not, whether it helps you to meet your internal goals like being more environmentally friendly, or it increases your status, or you have some attitude around this technology or service. And also social norms will play a role. If you feel that the group is the group of peers you are part of is very adverse to this technology, you will be less willing to buy it or use it yourself. But if instead it's very sexy, for example, to have solar panels and all the neighbors have it on their roofs and you're the one who hasn't it yet, you really want to have the solar panels as well, just to be part of the group. And self-efficacy is something that explains to what extent people think that they they are capable of acquiring this technology, understanding how to install it, understanding how to use it to take benefit of it. So it really says, do they think they can buy it easily? Is it too complicated to compare various models of this specific technology? And if you see the combination of attitude, the social norm, and self-efficacy will lead to an intention to, for example, buy this technology or not. And if you have this intention, it still can be influenced by external facilitators or external barriers, which are on a top and on the bottom indicated, so that's more from your context, whether it really turns into behavior. For example, if there's a subsidy available, then it's a facilitator which makes even, if you already had intention to buy something, makes it even more logical to really go and buy this technology or product. And then if you perform this behavior, you will get some feedback. Does it feel good? What kind of feedback do you get from your surroundings? And if it's positive, it will strengthen your behavior and maybe turns it into habitual behavior. But if you get negative feedback, you will change your behavior. So this is a bit how we looked in the context of this task to, human behavior. And in the work program, we had 3 phases. The research, so collecting the information, was the main phase, and that took us 1.5 years. And then we start, to draw the conclusions and to develop a smart grid guidance document. I think that's on the website. And then after May 2014, we started with the dissemination. And this is clearly part of the dissemination, although the project officially has ended already. Let's first focus on what we gathered in the research phase. We looked, as I indicated before, at 3 topics. And I would like to start now with impacts of the market. And we just want to have a better understanding how a market in the electricity market in a specific country or specific region influence to what extent the consumer is willing to become part of a smart grid initiative. And this is an example of the UK. And it's just very important to understand, and I think everyone realizes this, that drivers differ from one context to another, and countries can differ very much one from another. But in the UK, they see smart grids as a way to support the transition to the low carbon economy. The low carbon economy will be mainly based on electricity, and if you have this intermittent renewable resources like wind and solar, you need smart grids to balance, amongst others, demand and supply. It's also a way to, smart grids is also a way in the UK in this transition to ensure security of supply. And it helps customers to minimize their costs, because it will be far more expensive to have all kind of backup generation capacity in place. So for all customers as a whole, it will be more cost effective to invest in smart grids. And last but not least is that it empowers consumers in a way that they can become a more active player in the whole energy sector. They will have more influence on their bill because they have a better understanding of what the consumption looks like and when prices are high or low, and they can switch their behavior accordingly. Then let's move to the facilitators that I referred to. And again, this is the UK. There's an incentive scheme that for DNOs, that's the district grid operators, district network operators, apologies. initially they were incentivized to seek for capital solutions. But now they have a scheme that helps them to at least equally evaluate in an equally positive way non-capital solutions like smart grids. And there's also an RIO approach to network regulation, and that's of Ofgem, that really is developed to support the whole energy transition and really provides incentives to deliver energy efficiency savings and really stimulates the use of more innovative ways in this sector. And then, on the other hand, is opposite to the facilitators, we have the barriers in the UK, and one of them is that the metering, very different from many other countries, is the responsibility of the energy supplier. So it's not of the network companies. It's really of the suppliers. And what turns out to be the case in many, it's a conclusion drawn based on many surveys, is that especially in those suppliers, the consumers have very, very little trust that these are reliable and are not just operating in their own, they expect they operate only in their own benefit and not in the benefit of any of the consumers. So they're very hesitant to trust the ones who are the key responsible party for this metering data. And another barrier is that time of use tariffs are not really widespread. So there's not a lot of incentive to act in a way, in a more flexible way than we are used to do for decades. And I just said that they are not incentivized to act differently, and here is an example of what kind of actions they can take to create some benefits for the grid or the grid operator, and also potentially for the suppliers. And one of them is in case of peak hours to reduce their consumption. So you want to have less load on the grid during peak hours. And the second picture, it shows energy efficiency measures that not just reduce the amount of consumption at a certain moment, but really bring down the whole load profile during the day. And then one that I think most of you are very familiar with is just peak shaving. So you move the consumption during peak hours to a moment where there's very little consumption. So then you make a more flat load curve. And the picture on the right bottom says that, actually quite logical, that the benefits of smart meters and the data coming available because of these smart meters will only create value once the smart meter rollout has been completed. And then you really see significant benefits for the grid operators. Okay, so this was a brief introduction to the aspects, the market aspects we looked at. And I think this next section is quite interesting. It's about the interaction with smart grid initiatives so far. And what we did is we took 23 case studies. Well, most of case studies come from the countries where we had a representative in the team from. And here you see nicely indicated what kind of actions were taken in those projects. It's pilot projects, I think, and there are many more projects, but at the time of this assessment, most of them were not completed, and at least the results were not available, and there was no evaluation available. So we took this case studies because we had some, kind of complete information about them. And the controls that is referred to in the key are controls to actively manage demand, so such as, for example, automated load controls, but also home or building energy management systems, and also smart thermostats. So just to give you a feeling, if you see this red quarter bullet, it's referring to this. And advice typically refers at well, what kind of uh, um, yeah, what kind of advice was given, for example, to individuals or maybe also to groups, well, on how to act. It can be very simple advice on behavioral aspects, but it can also be advice on, for example, refurbishment measures to reduce the energy consumption. It can be quite diverse. And feedback is well, it's also it's more referring to insight, and the advice was more well on actions they could take. And the feedback is mostly based on data collected with smart meters and includes visualizing information on in-home displays, for example. It could be web-based feedback, billing information, feedback maybe on telephones or tablets. And well, tariff structures, I briefly already referred to time of use tariffs, but it could also be critical peak pricing, peak time rebates, real-time pricing. So this gives you an idea of how, which components were included in each of the case studies that we assessed for this task. And we also did a review of 22 consumer surveys. And actually, you get some quite diverse answers in this surveys, but it's quite informative. And to be honest, most of those surveys came from the UK because there were a lot of well, effort was taken there to learn more about consumer attitudes, especially related to the rollout of smart meters. And maybe it's nice just to go through some of them. Well, I already said that some consumers are skeptical and lack trust. Well, they just feel that the big energy companies will take advantage of them anyway. And how can it not be contradictory to the business models where they try to sell energy to help you reduce energy? So it is quite confusing. And what also was not very helpful is that most of the consumers have no clear understanding of a difference between the energy supplier and the grid operator. Yes, and well, actually that's what I just said. There's a lot of misunderstanding about why industry stakeholders are developing smart grids. But once they end users understand in what way it can also be beneficial to them as a group or to them as a person, they're more willing to participate. And especially if there's some financial payment in return. And if you ask how much they expect to get back, you really get very different answers, and some really expect big values. That's quite unrealistic. But I think they don't have a clue of what the value of their current energy bill is. But in many cases, it is not as unreasonable. So yeah, that's at least provides us with some hope that we really can convince them to participate. But still there is a group of consumers that says not to participate under any circumstances. And well, okay, that's fine. Everyone has his free choice. And I think this is not the key target group we should look at. Just to summarize, well, what we found in analyzing those pilot projects and surveys, well, unfortunately, there was a limited amount of information on consumer attitudes, and I think this has to do with the time that we did this analysis or assessment. There were still very few smart grid projects being completed that focused on service offerings and well, consumer engagement. I think most of the projects finalized at the time had really a technology focus, so prove that technology can work and see how things can be connected, and there was at the time less information or less focus on consumers. So there is information, but it's not exactly clear what works for whom and why it works, and where does it work and where doesn't it. And information from consumer surveys shows that consumers say they would like to be included in case there is a financial reward. But still, evidence shows that there are many consumers that don't want to engage in smart grids, even if there's a financial benefit. And we also looked at readiness levels, both the technology readiness levels to see in what stage of development the technology is, and at market readiness levels. So is the market ready to work with the technology? And actually we see that the technologies are ready, but the market is not really ready to dive into smart grids. And that's what we refer to the chasm that needs to be crossed in the picture. I think everyone knows this Rogers picture with the innovators and the early adopters on the left side. And then it's the key challenge for all innovations to reach the early majority and, late majority and ultimately the laggards. Early adopters are involved in most of the pilots, so that's also a bit creating a blurred picture, that meaning that it's not all conclusions from this pilot can be copied to other segments of users. But we really need them because they show the technology to others, and nothing is as strong as peers showing that something is nice to use. And then finding number 4 is there are some consumers' concerns, and they can really get big if you don't take care of them well. We saw some demonstrations in the United States. Well, there are some pictures in the report, and it really starts to get a bit aggressive, especially if it comes to privacy concerns or the increasing cost that people perceive to have had after installment of smart meters. So please be careful to address concerns, and also try to learn why non-participants hesitate, or at least, or don't want to sign up to specific smart grid projects. We can really draw lessons from that. And yeah, I think it's well, maybe it's not, it's quite straightforward. What works for one group clearly not necessarily works for other groups. So it's always context specific. And well, I think if you understand the attitudes and beliefs and the social norms that we showed in this behavior model, it helps you really to make a custom-made solution for a specific target group. And then, well, the last specific task, topic-specific task, was on risks and rewards. So can we a bit better understand decision-making and decision-making processes, and does this help us to assess what may work or may not be well received by consumers? Well, I think neoclassical economy theory is quite clear. If something creates benefits for the consumer that are bigger than the costs, consumers are expected to be willing to adopt this technology or product or service. If it's more costly, well, it's very unlikely they will accept it. And here is, well, I think everyone realized that neoclassical theory is not necessarily what happens. And here's an example from a program. It's actually not a smart grid program, but it's an insulation program in the UK, where there was free Loft insulation, and people got this offered for free. But there was an audit of the house needed, and they had to allow workmen into their place. And then, well, they would save on their energy bill about £180 a year. So that's quite an attractive offer, no investments and just a yearly saving. But still, as we see in this pie chart, there is some segments on the right-hand side that were not included. Some of them on the bottom was no response when the assessor called. But on the orange part, there were also 16% that allowed an assessor to come to their house and still did not sign up ultimately for the program. And yeah, many reasons may play a role. Maybe they were hesitant to empty their loft, which is something that people not typically look forward to. And I think they even offered some support in helping to empty their loft and also to bring to collect stuff and bring it to second-hand shops or something like this. And then there was a larger number signing up. But what I just wanted to say is that financial drivers is not the key solution. There are many more conditions that need to be set right before someone will sign up for a program. So looking at the risks and rewards, there were again some key findings. Well, I think the first one was already mentioned before, and then the second, it's always very good if you can provide an element of choice. If you can if you just have to offer sign up one yes and two no, people are more tended to not sign up. But if you have a 1A opportunity to sign up for this based on a monthly fee, or to sign up 1B based on a one-time investment, for example, then people feel they have a choice and are more triggered to choose between the best two alternatives, and are less tended to vote for the no. So if you provide an element of choice, people are more willing to sign up. But on the other hand, don't make it too difficult to them. So if you have, for example, 4 or 5 choices, or maybe even 10, people get a bit confused and they stop evaluating the alternatives and are again more tended to vote for no. So yes, create an element of choice, but please keep it to a limited number of options. And also take care when framing the initiative. Sometimes people, if they have something that they feel they lose, gives them a different feeling from what they have if they would gain the same number. So emotions are stronger when you lose 100 euros, for example, than compared to the emotions that you have when you win 100 euro. The 100 loss it really hurts pretty much. So if you manage to use this mechanism to define your offers to clients, it may really make a difference. And also, if you try to describe some benefits for participation in the program, maybe it's 25 euros, I don't know, for 2 months or 3 months. It sounds like a quite small amount of money, especially as compared to their total monthly budget. But if you compare it, for example, at the monthly energy costs, it may look much bigger, or even maybe you can explain it in 2 visits to the cinema, and then it creates some value. But just 25 euros not necessarily is a driver for quite a group of people to act. It depends a bit on your income level, etc. But it's very helpful if you can translate it into relative terms. And take care over the timing of rewards. People like it if they get a reward as soon as possible, so they are more tended to act the way you want if you can give them the reward, actually immediately. This is some key aspects or key findings that we found from the research part. Then we went to the collation, and we made implementation guidance documents. And actually this is, it brings together a lot of information. It says something about approach we followed, but also the information we collected. There are quite some examples in it, which is it's really nice, I think. And it can be used by anyone who has some intentions to start up smart grid initiatives. And yes, this is maybe a brief outline of the report. Section 2, we just gave an overview of smart grids and explain how we look at behavior. It is the behavior model that I showed you in the start. And then in section 3 you see actually a brief description of all the steps in the process that you need to take from very first idea to start the smart grid initiative to actually the implementation phase. And this section 3 provides really a nice overview, and it helps you to select what kind of steps are interesting or relevant for you to read. And for further reading, then you can look at the section that address this step in more detail. And maybe it's nice to briefly go through these steps. Step 1 is understand the drivers, and this is not necessarily just from the end users, it's also the drivers, the advantages you want to create in the system. I gave some examples of the UK who thinks that smart grids helps them to create this low carbon society, and also to reduce costs for the end users at the end. So these are the drivers to start with the smart grid initiative and define exactly the outcomes. I gave you some examples as well on what end users can do. So it was load shifting, or maybe energy efficiency, or maybe just a reduction of capacity during peak time, peak hours. But you must have a very clear insight of what you want consumers to do, because if you don't know exactly what you want, you never will get the wanted behavior. And then define the target consumers. It sounds simple. It's not just selecting a group somewhere in the region. It can have to do something with geography, but it's as much can have to do with consumer segments. And there is some consumer segmentation in this report included as well. But also can have to do with the kind of technologies that are placed in their houses. For example, if they have electric boiler, they can be a target group because they have some kind of flexibility, want to switch off the on or off the boiler. Or they may have a heat pump, or they may have be a consumer segment that is more tended to buy. It might be a consumer segment that is more tended to buy an electric vehicle. Then, well, they could be your target group. So define very well what kind of people you want to have, you want to reach to, and then define the offering. So what is it you're going to propose to the end user? And we already explained before that the financial offer is often not enough of a trigger for them to participate. And once you start implementing this, you must be aware that you need to have ongoing support. If there are some concerns, please help out the people as soon as possible, because you don't want to have dropouts. Often if people start to engage in a smart grid initiative, they are not very likely to drop out. But if there's technical issues that are not solved fast enough, they may share this with peers, and it may have a disastrous impact on your project. Then try to assess the benefits, and here we look mainly at financial benefits and how are you going to distribute those benefits amongst the stakeholders, because there may be some benefits, for example, for DSO, the district operator, system operator, and some for the supplier, and and how are you going to divide those benefits also with the stakeholders, because you want to have financial incentives for them as well. And and then ultimately, before you start implementing, you need to have a monitoring and evaluation strategy to make sure that you learn, and also to see if the project or the program delivers what you had in mind. And then, so that's the whole, the process of steps taken from idea to implementation. And then in section 12, there are some tools. There is an assessment matrix to help you evaluate, assess the benefits. So that's step 6, sorry. And there's also, as I said, some consumer segmentation models, and it's quite interesting to have a look at. And then there's a section with some suggestions for further reading. Overall, as a summary of the project, I think it's nice to define some key messages, and this is our top 5. First of all, make sure that there are some tangible, direct benefits to consumers. and try to meet the specific needs of target consumers. And these are not necessarily always related to energy or to to financial aspects. So it can have to do with safety, it can have to do with feeling of control, contribution to environmental targets. It can have a wide range of needs. So you really have to have an understanding of the needs of your target consumer. So you really actually should have some conversations with them, or have some questionnaires with them, or use some other tools to assess what their needs are. And then the second finding is that community engagement can be very powerful. If you manage to find a community, you already need to have some sense of community, of course. But then if you manage to identify such a community that ideally has some goals or some ambitions related to sustainability or more efficient use of energy, it can really be a powerful motivator for behavioral change. But also, again, it needs to be tailor-made, what you're going to offer. And community champions or ambassadors could really help you with the recruitment of their peers. And then message 3, mentioned before, there must be an element of choice, and just be aware of this. It is really helpful. To include this in your offering. And also mentioned before, avoid too much choice. Key message number 4, take care of framing. So it's very often technical experts deal with smart grids, but you actually need a marketing person that really helps you frame the initiative, because this directly can influence how a consumer perceives this offer. And then the last key message is understand the customer concerns, and do not underestimate the strength of these, and how disastrous they can be if they not dealt with adequately. Okay. And yes, this is just a brief overview of what kind of documents we delivered. So for the research phase, we had 3 reports. The collation part, it was the guidance document. And finally, we have this presentation made in an executive summary. Okay, this was my presentation. I just wonder if there's any questions. Thank you very much